Okay. Well, how's everybody feeling? Pretty good? All right, now we're going to pull the room really quick. What did we think of mic versus no mic worship? I felt like it was a little bit easier to hear, a little bit easier to get engaged. What do we think?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. All right, well, there we go. Ben, fantastic job. That was wonderful. Your voice just makes me want to cry, and so it's just wonderful. No, it was really, really good, Ben, and always great having you and Caitlin here. Obviously, the last 3 weeks, Alan, who's not in here right now, taught us on American history and really life from a biblical, and as he would put it, a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. And the purpose behind that is not that we would be focused on politics and how politics are going to ruin the world, but that we would be aware and that we would apply ourselves to the world around us and not believe that, oh, well, you know, my vote doesn't matter. You know, the last stat showed that I've seen, I should say, the last time I saw a stat about the amount of Christians who participate in elections is about 50%. So if only 50% of Christians are participating in elections, what that means is there's another 50%. There's millions and millions of Christians who could be voting godly principles into offices that could influence the world. And so that's why we do things like that. That's why we have Alan come in and share. It's not to politicize the church, but it's to push godly principles into the world around us. Y'all following? Okay. So that's the purpose behind the last few weeks that we did. Alan did a fantastic job. He told several stories, one of which I want to remind us about is when the Continental Army was trying to flee from the British, and they were completely trapped. And then the Lord, through several miracles, worked on their behalf. Not only did he make the British stop attacking for no reason whatsoever, they just said, no, we'll finish them off in the morning. We'll stop fighting them tonight. He then created a fog so thick that you couldn't see someone just a few feet away from you, which allowed the Continental Army to board boats and start sailing away and trying to escape. I think a lot of us have heard this story, but we need to recognize God's hand in it. And then not only that, they had watchmen set to warn if the British were coming. Well, there was some miscommunication, and an entire set of watchmen had left their post during the escape. So for 45 minutes, the escape was not watched. Nobody was watching their back, and yet the Lord still prevailed on their behalf. It goes even further that I believe the man was German who was living in the area, saw the army escaping, and was loyal to the British, but he didn't speak English. And when he saw the Continental Army escaping, he tried to go to the British and say, hey, they're escaping. You need to go now. You need to go stop them. Well, sure enough, because they couldn't communicate in the same language, the British, instead of taking him to a translator, put him in prison. And so he sat in prison for several hours until it was too late. And when finally they brought a translator and he said, hey, they're getting away, as soon as they get to the shores, they saw the very last boat sailing off into the horizon. And it's incredible the way that God will work on the behalf of people who are trying to institute his principles. And so today I kind of want to top off what I had talked about 2 weeks before Alan started. And I kind of want to lead into what we're going into this next month or so. And I don't know exactly which one it is, but I'm very confident that God has a plan and he has something specific to share with all of us. So that we understand, the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the spirit of a man. And it does apply to women, but it's a little bit catchier to say the spirit of a man. Like it's catchy. And the reason that we're talking about that is because I was listening to a book series, and a character in the series talks about that when evil stands against humankind, the desire is not only to win, it's to break the spirit of a man. Because that would mean something far more than victory. It would mean that what they stand for is not worth persevering for. And what we're going to talk about as these next 3 weeks come is exactly who it is that we serve, why it is he puts so much emphasis on us as people, and why I believe that the spirit of a man, his belief, and we've talked about this quite a bit in Pneuma, which is, it's really belief that you give voice to, which leads to action. And so when I think about the spirit of a man, what that is it's a belief which he speaks out and acts out. So when I say the spirit of a man, we need to understand that what I mean is, I'm talking about the spirit that declares what they believe and stands for it regardless of the consequences. That's what we're talking about. And so today I want to bring up a very practical topic. I want to share something really amazing that I learned, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit, and it's slaying dragons. So if you're taking notes, that's the title today, and I've talked about this quite a bit, and I don't know if any of you are tired of hearing me talk about, slaying the dragons in front of you, but it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this term, and it can almost sound like apocalyptic, or at the very least, like very medieval. And it's like, man, what are you talking about dragons for? Like, we're not in Lord of the Rings. And the reason I bring that up is because there's two reasons, really. One is because the word is clear that we battle against dark rulers in the spiritual every day. So what we're dealing with spiritually is very dragon-like in nature. It's dangerous, it's way stronger than you are, and it wants to kill you. And it wants to stop you from getting to the goal that God has set in front of you. And the other reason that I use this language is because your mind plays an incredible trick on you when you're facing a possible consequence. And what I mean is this, is we've all had that feeling when we're taking a test and you get your grade back and you thought you did great, and you're like, man, I did great on that test. I'm going to get an A, and then you get an F, and you're like, man, that is the worst. And all of a sudden, those few lines on a paper that we call an F, all of a sudden start making emotions come up in you that don't resemble a few lines on a paper. What it resembles is the stress and the worry of what you've worked for, what you care about, what you desire, what you look for in your future begins to feel like it's slipping away. That's what most of us call stress. You start to get stressed out because of this grade. And it's very interesting. Psychologically, what's happening is your limbic system, it's the predatory part of your brain. It's the part that puts you in fight or flight, where you see something, you jump back, you're like, ah! And it's like a stick, not a snake, Y'all ever experienced that, where you get scared and it's like, oh man, it's just a rock. Like, we're good. That's the part of your brain that takes over, and it works faster than the logical side of your brain. And so when it engages, what that means is literally you are acting on purely instinct. There's no logic involved. And that same phenomena where that part of your brain is activated takes place when you get this kind of bad news, when you see that bad grade on a paper. And maybe you're like, well, I didn't care about school anyways, so that doesn't apply to me. And it's like, well, okay, let's think about a job. Well, how about if you ever got fired? Or you went to an interview and didn't get the job? You get a very similar feeling. That you had this hope for the future, you had this hope for something, and when you are let down, your mind is telling you that's a dragon. That's something that's trying to kill you, that's something that's trying to prevent you from getting to your future. And what I want to address is how we deal practically with that phenomenon. Are y'all following? I think it's very important that we don't downplay what's actually happening, because yes, we're talking about an F. I'm not trying to say that if you get a bad grade and you're looking at an F, you're like, oh, that's an F. That is what you're dealing with, but your brain believes it's something else. And so you don't need to deal with it on the level of, oh, well, this is nothing. You need to address your mind as though you are dealing with something specific. This is why studying is so important. Because what studying does is it says, but I've trained for this. And so going into a test, you're not as afraid of getting that F because you've trained for this. In the same way, in our lives, every single day we go through things, and God has been training us for it, and many of us don't recognize that our destinies, God has been training us for years before we even recognized that that's where we were heading. One example of this for me was in high school. I was terrified to spell words wrong because I've never been a good speller. Owen's a fantastic speller. I'm like the worst. I get it wrong all the time. And in high school, we would do short answer essays basically. And so it's one paper and you write your essay, and I would rewrite entire paragraphs to avoid spelling one word. I'm not kidding you. I did this a whole bunch in my high school career because I was like, I don't want to spell just one word wrong. And so I just rewrite the paragraph, and And what happened was I got really, really good at explaining things several different ways. And so you can look at that on one side and go, oh man, that's so sad, he was so embarrassed. Or you can look at it as God was training me. And so now doing what I do today, where I'm constantly writing, I'm constantly trying to deliver messages in several ways so that everybody can understand it, all of a sudden what was a crutch is what God was using to prepare me for the dragons in my life. You know, another example of that for me was that I used to have this really bad problem of getting super nervous when I would do public speaking, and I would just sweat like a waterfall. I think some of us have seen the preachers, where they have a whole rag on their podium, and they're I'm just that was me. And it was really funny because I would disqualify myself from teaching or public speaking because I was so worried about the sweating problem. And what God taught to me was kind of two things. Number one was when I saw people on stage who were sweating, and I was oh, okay, it's okay. Other people do it too. I'm not alone. But the other thing is, he taught me probably the most important lesson he's ever taught me, which is that Satan is going to try and use everything possible to disqualify you from what God set in front of you. And he'll try and tell you, you can't take on that dragon because you're too short. You can't take on that dragon because you've never faced that kind of dragon before. You can't take on that guy because you don't have the right armor. And what God's trying to say is, no. I've been preparing you for this. Maybe you didn't recognize it at the time. Maybe you didn't see it when you were in the middle of it. But I'm trying to tell you, I've been preparing you for this. Are y'all with me? That's one person, and it was a whisper. Are y'all with me? Now, I want to give you a little phrase here, and really it's just an encouragement more than anything, but I do want you to take hold of it, and I'll explain it, so don't take it at face value and go, oh, that's ridiculous. I think differently. And it's don't downplay the dragons in front of you. It inhibits your ability to rise to their challenge. Now, I'm not saying to make a bigger deal out of things than they are. So in the example of a school grade, obviously all of us are out of school, but the example applies, and I think all of us can understand it relatively easily, is no, one grade won't ruin your life. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply yourself to get the good grade. Are y'all following? So no, it won't ruin your life, but it's an opportunity to rise to the challenge, to say, I'm going to conquer this challenge. I've thought about this quite a bit, and procrastinators, they're probably the best at this dragon slaying concept among us. And I know that's kind of weird, but here's why, is because they don't take on a task until they really realize, oh, this is here, this dragon is in front of me. I didn't train at all, I didn't prepare, but they're right here. And I want to point two things out. Number one, sometimes that is the way that you are confronted with the dragon. And we're going to talk about this in just a second, but there are lots of different dragons you face in your life, and one of those is the one that you didn't see coming, and he's trying to take something that you already have. Now, procrastinators are great at dealing with these kinds of issues because that's how their entire life has been. Everything just kind of showed up, and they're all right, time to take care of this. This is the reason why an hour before an essay's due, they'll just get going. And they're man, I haven't written a word, but now, inspiration, I'm ready to go. The reason that occurs is because deep down inside, God has wired something into them, something called the spirit of a man, which is only activated when challenge arrives. And they don't feel that challenge when their essay is 10 days away. They don't feel that challenge when their essay's 3 months away. They feel that challenge when it's an hour away. Now, I'm not saying it's good to procrastinate. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that their spirit has been activated, and now they're I'm not just dealing with an essay, I'm dealing with the dragon. And when I'm dealing with the dragon, I can engage, I can be interested, I can fight, and I can enjoy the struggle. And sure, they fail sometimes, but so do the people who worry about it all the time, and then you give up a whole bunch of awesome that the Lord has for you because you're worried about this essay. What I'm trying to say is, there are dragons, and the Lord has equipped each and every one of us to face the ones that are on the way. That doesn't mean we're always going to win. That doesn't mean we're always going to perform perfectly, but it does mean He's been preparing us. Now, on this topic of procrastinators, I bring this up because I want to make one thing clear: is procrastination can be dealt with in a healthy way, and it's very simple. You address the challenge ahead of you as a dragon. I did this week, actually, is I was trying to sit down and write the message, and I just really could not get my mind into it. And so I said, you know what, no, I'm not going to think about this as a message. I'm going to think about this as a goal that needs to be conquered, as a dragon that needs to be slain. And sure enough, I was able to write quite a bit more of the message than I probably would have otherwise. And so what I'm saying is, when you're faced with a challenge that you know is coming, but it's not here yet, you don't feel the pressure yet, begin to visualize that challenge as a dragon that's in front of you today. And say, no, I'm not going to wait until the deadline to fill that out, because I have the opportunity to enter his dungeon room now, to face him now. I don't have to wait until the clock hits 0. I can go get him now. Like, think about it. If you've ever played a game where there's like a story mode, and you can choose when you go and fight the boss. I think some of the guys in here know what I'm talking about, but it's like there's a whole bunch of side quests you can do to get stronger, or you can just go try and fight the boss now. If that's what it takes to get you in the mindset where you do the hard thing, where you chase the dream you've been wanting to chase, where you apply yourself to the training that you need, well, sometimes it's a nice trick to go, no, I'm going to go into the boss room now, instead of waiting until I feel ready. I think it's important today that we recognize what an important role your decision-making plays in your ability to defeat the challenges. I want to point something out before I go any further, and it's this. If we're talking about a dragon, then I want to be clear on what they represent. As a dragon means absolutely nothing if they're not protecting something or trying to take something that you care about, because you just stay away from it. Like, I'm not worried about trying to figure out rocket science, because I don't care about rocket science. I don't care about doing anything with rocket science. So that dragon that other people face is not a worry to me. So if in your life you're dealing with something inflicting stress on your life, what this means is somewhere along the way you've attributed that issue with something you care about and desire. Are y'all following? Now, what's so important about this process of identifying that is you have to be honest with yourself. There's not a principle today I'm going to share more important than honesty. And you will find teachings throughout all of history that talk about the importance of being truthful, and not just truthful in the sense of like, I don't lie, but truthful in the sense that you seek out what is most true and try and live in that manner. This is why the gospel is so effective for turning people's lives around, because it's the truth. It's the best possible thing. And so when people get a hold of the truth, something that they can ground their lives in and they can never regret, because they know that it was the best possible thing they could spend their lives supporting, chasing, what happens is you see life change. And so when we're talking about dragons, I want to be clear that you need to be honest with yourself about what you want. You need to be honest with yourself about where you are in that process. And this is incredibly hard sometimes, because many of us have an idea of what we want, and then when we get there, we're like, man, I didn't want this at all. I like this other thing that I got to do a little bit on the way here, but this isn't what I wanted. It's what was expected of me. It's what I did because I felt like it was the right thing, but it's not what I wanted. Now, I'm not saying you get to do everything you want. That's not what I'm trying to push. Obviously, in life, you have to do a lot of things that you don't, especially in general with your career. You have to do a job. Most people do a job that they're not incredibly passionate about or love. I'm not saying that has to be you. I'm just saying I'm not promising that won't be you. Are y'all following? What I'm trying to say is you need to be honest about why these dragons are making you afraid. Even if that's a deficiency in yourself, even if it's, I'm afraid to face that dragon because I don't think I'm smart enough, I don't think I'm good enough, I think I sweat too much on stage. You need to be honest with yourself about why this dragon matters to you. Why does this grade matter so much to you? Why does their opinion matter so much to you? You need to be honest. And once you're honest, you need to take aim. And what I mean by that is you need to set your sights, and I mentioned this a second ago, but you need to set your sights on the best possible good. There's nothing better you can spend your life doing than identifying the best possible good you can achieve in your life and chasing that with everything you have. Even if that looks like working 9 to 5 every single day, and then once you get done, once a week going and volunteering at a food shelter. If that to you is what the Lord has put in your heart as the best possible good you can serve, then that's the best possible good. For me and Taylor, it's very simple. Right now in our lives, we feel like the best possible good is to be faithful in the church. It's not easy to come up here every single weekend. It's not easy to feel like we're not going the places we expected, doing the things we expected, that the things we're trying aren't working the way we expected. But we keep going back to God and saying, God, what is the best possible good? What does faithfulness look like in this season? What he consistently is saying is, be consistent. Keep showing up. Keep bringing the passion. Keep doing your best. It's the best possible good we can do right now. Now, when I say take aim, I don't just mean today. I mean for your life. You know, you'll hear people say create a mission and a vision statement for your life. And it's a great thing to do. To say, here's my mission on a daily basis. Here's my vision of when I look back at my life, what have I created? I don't think all of us understand exactly what a mission and vision are, but I want to be very clear. As a mission is what you do to create a vision. And the vision is the eventual goal of once I get here, I have achieved what I set out to do. The mission is how you get there. Does that make sense? I never had someone explain that to me super clearly, and one day the Lord helped me and it just kind of clicked. But it's important to recognize you need to see, what do I need to do and where am I looking to go? Because when you identify those two things, all of a sudden when you encounter other people's dragons, you're not going to have that same reaction, the same worry, the same upsetness, because guess what? They're not on your path. And sure, you're going to encounter some challenges sometimes that aren't on your path. And I'm not saying you won't, but it won't have the same worrying effect because you know what you're aimed at. You know what the Lord has said. You know what his promises are. And you know that this dragon can't displace what God has already set in place. This is so important that we recognize that you have to have an aim. Now I want to address a few of the dragons that we'll face in our lives. And the first one is this, is that one of the first one you're going to encounter is the one that you knew was going to be defending the treasure you've been pursuing. And most often this looks like an interview for a job that you want, because the interview is the obstacle to get the job. Are y'all following? And so you have to present yourself well. You have to be well-spoken. You have to hopefully have the qualifications and education and maybe a little bit of experience to get this job. And so it's a dragon. It's something that you have to conquer. The next one that we'll run into is ones that you didn't know were defending the treasure, but they're still defending the treasure that you want. This is when the surprises come up, when you didn't know you were going to have 2.5 years of experience to get this job, and all of a sudden you're 2.5 years set back from getting to that treasure you want. These are the dragons that have to be confronted to get to where you want to go, but you didn't know you were going to have to confront them. You know, I love this Psalm 144:1. David says this. He says, "Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle." When I read this, I felt so clearly David didn't say, I asked him to train me. He just said, the Lord trains me. He didn't say he knew what was happening at the time. He just said, the Lord trains me. In other words, even the dragons that you didn't know were coming, God's still been preparing you for. And I brought that up a little bit earlier, but I want to be clear is, I don't know what the next step for you is, but I know God's been training you. And especially if you don't know what the next step is, I guarantee God's been training you. Now, you'll hear this a lot, and I don't believe that the duration of your training is necessarily something that has to go on forever if you have a big destiny, but I do believe the effectiveness of your training does. And very often you will extend seasons of waiting or training by not learning the lessons that God has for you. I want to be clear that there's going to be some unseen dragons at every point of your life, and if you will be intimately involved with the Lord during your training, you will find that there's more lessons to gain than you thought. One of those for me was back when I was working at restaurants. The Lord did this funny thing with me where every night, if you get done at a restaurant, you have to clean your section. And some of us have done this before, and it's like you have to sweep and wipe everything down and refill the salt and pepper. And, if you need new ketchup, you go get a new ketchup bottle. And just simple things like that, but you have to clean your section. And generally, at the restaurant I'm talking about, it would take me 35, 40 minutes to do. Well, after I would do that, generally, the Lord would put it on my heart to go bless someone else. And to go help them. And I had several opportunities where I got to minister to people, and that was great, but that wasn't the lesson. The lesson was this, is for my entire life, I have hated not having a plan. More than that, I've hated when I had a plan, and then my plan got messed up, and so I wasn't on time, and then because I wasn't on time, the world ended. And what the Lord did in this season was he taught me that it's okay that even when you get off, even when it's time to go home, it's okay to stay a little longer, to help someone along the way. And go figure, a year later, he says, okay, Matthew, I want you to start a church, and here's what I want the mission to be. I want you to help people where you are with what you have when you're there. Don't be in too much of a rush to follow the plan, because you're going to miss people, you're going to miss opportunities along the way. I didn't know the Lord was trying to teach me to slow down. I thought he was trying to get me to give the gospel, but he was trying to teach me to slow down. Now, I got to give the gospel, but he was trying to teach me to slow down, to look at the person in front of me. The third dragon that I've found will deal with is the one that tries to take something that you already have. And I mentioned this already, so I'll be brief. It can be more serious, where your house is invaded, where a hurricane strikes, where you just have something that you thought you were going to be able to have forever taken away. And it can be anything. It can be a job, it can be a house, it can be anything. But you had it already, and the dragon comes to take it. Now, these are important things, because often, not always, but often, when this obstacle appears, you need to meet it. But that doesn't mean you're supposed to win. Are y'all following me? Because sometimes your season with that thing is over. And God's trying to tell you, it's okay to let this go. You need to confront the feelings. You need to confront that part of you that rises up and says, I'm losing everything that I have, everything that I wanted. You need to deal with those things, but that doesn't mean you get to keep the treasure. Now, God's not going to leave you empty-handed. He's going to bring something even better, something new. And when I say even better, I don't mean like you had one car, now you have two cars. What I mean is you're going to have his blessing and his favor in the season you're walking into, whatever that looks like. The last dragon that the Lord brought to my mind of something he wanted to talk about was this, is the one that confronts you as a consequence of poor training or training poorly. And what I mean is this, it's the one who stops you from going forward because you haven't trained enough, or when you were training, you didn't take it seriously. And these things come up for all of us. And I want to encourage you, and this is what I meant when I talked about the waiting season that we can extend, is when you're in a season where God's trying to teach you something, I would encourage you, learn it the first time. I have this funny thing with the Lord where he'll tell me something I don't want to hear, where it's like, hey, I want you to do this. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to do that. And typically, within 5 minutes of him saying something, when I have that first gut-wrenching response, for most of us, we could relate to this. If he's ever told you to give, you're like, I don't want to give. That's not happening. I don't want to do that. That's too much money. I have a place for that already. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel whatever. I don't want to do that. About 5 minutes into a dialogue with the Lord about it, because you say it, but then you're like, okay, but I'll be a good Christian. I'll talk with him about it, and you're like, okay, what are we talking about here? What exactly does this look like? How uncomfortable do I have to be to pass this test? And I always settle on the same thought every single time, is I would rather be obedient and in God's will than have this money that I view as security. I would so much rather be obedient and get to walk into the next blessing, the next season of favor, the next thing the Lord has for me, than to stay here and be comfortable because, I have this security blanket. And it doesn't have to be money. That was just a random example that I thought we could identify with. This is anything that you're like, this is my thing. This makes me feel confident. This makes me feel good. This makes me feel safe. And really what these things are is it's anything that's taking the place of God in your life. It's anything that says you're safe because of me. Very often these are the things that are preventing us from training for the dragons in our life. Now, I'm going to read us a few verses and then we're going to close. And the reason that I saved the majority of the scripture for the end is because it leads into the series we're going into. And I wanted to be very practical at the start and then give us the awesome Bible side at the end, because I just love the Bible so much, and I think that God's word is far more powerful than anything else we can possibly say or I can bring to you in a weekend. And the overarching theme here is this: it's our God is a warrior. And it's so easy to go, he's God. There's nobody he can't take. And it's like, okay, well, sure. But that's not because he just is, not even interested in participating in the world he created. No, it's because he wanted to be a symbol that you could cling to and know that it would never fail. And so when you see these verses I'm about to read, I want you to read it from the perspective of you have a God who is so far beyond your enemy that the very mention of his name makes darkness itself tremble. John 16:33 says this: I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Exodus 15:3, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. I love this translation because often you'll see that translated, the Lord is a warrior. But I love this. It's actually the ESV. It's the second most accurate translation we have. Number one's the TLV. In case you didn't know, it's the Tree of Life version. It's only slightly more accurate because it'll put in the Hebrew or the Greek word if they just don't feel the English word fits the context good enough. And then they just explain the word in the back of the book. It's great stuff. But the reason I bring that up is this. This is very likely the most accurate understanding of this verse you can possibly find. The Lord is a man of war. The way to understand that is this: the Lord's character is one where he is ready to make war with the enemy. The Lord is a man of war. He's an expert. Nobody makes war like the Lord does. Jeremiah 20:11, and I love this because all of us know Jeremiah 29:11. In my opinion, this verse may be even more encouraging, so let me read it to you. Jeremiah 20:11. But the Lord is with me as a dreaded warrior. Therefore my persecutors will stumble. They will not overcome me. They will be greatly ashamed, for they will not succeed. Their eternal dishonor will never be forgotten. The Lord is a dreaded warrior. What I'm trying to get through to us is your brain responds to challenges in life as if they're dragons in front of you because your God is a warrior who's ready to fight. He made you in his image, and what that means is you are designed to be a man and woman of war. And your mind desires to put you in a war to inspire that dormant ability inside of you to overcome obstacles. And that wakes up most when you're faced with a dragon. I'm going to do a couple quick hits here just to prove to you that we face an enemy who's really best described as a dragon. Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. John 12:31, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. In other words, Satan, the ruler of this world. Now, obviously, that verse comes before Jesus died, and Jesus took his authority. But what's my point? My point is we have an enemy who at the very least was once the ruler of this world. You think he doesn't want to try and rule through you? So often we don't understand this thing, and I'll be brief with this because I know we're almost out of time, but the enemy has no more authority. The only way he gets to use authority is if he gets to trick you into using yours on his behalf. And what that means is he's going to lie to you, he's going to deceive you, he's going to pretend in front of you, he's going to tell you things about other people that aren't true, he's going to make you think things about yourself that aren't true, all so that you will give him authority. You will allow him to use you as his mouthpiece because you're the one who's actually allowed to use that authority. We have an enemy who used to be the ruler. He knows how to rule. Now, he wasn't very good at it, but he knows how. And when I say he's not good at it, I don't mean that the devil's not cunning. He's very cunning. He's just not Jesus. And so I want to be clear that we have an enemy who's used to ruling, and so we need to be aware, we need to train, and we need to get in the Word. I want to read us one more, and then I'll finish. Is Judges 6:13. And the angel of the Lord, when the Bible ever says the angel of the Lord, it's referring to Jesus pre-incarnation. I've talked about that before. I can't go into all the verses, but it's important for this. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. Now, this was Jesus saying this to Gideon before Gideon had done anything worthy of being called a man of war. Gideon goes on to defame, is that the right word? Like put yourself down? I don't know why it's not working in my brain right now. Gideon goes on to talk bad about himself to the Lord and say, oh, well, I'm the worst, I'm the least of the tribes of Israel, and I'm the least in my tribe of the least family, and I'm the least of my brothers, and just totally gives himself like a really hard rap. But Jesus said what over him before he ever did anything worthy of being called a man of war? You're a mighty man of valor. In other words, before you've ever done anything worthy of being called, worthy of the Lord recognizing you, God is saying over your life, you're a mighty man of valor. You're a mighty woman of valor. You're going to prevail against odds that should be too big for you. What I'm trying to say is, God's already spoken over your life. He's already spoken victory. And the only question is, are you going to take him up on his offer to provide it? And all the training that he's been doing with you, the taking aim, the being honest about the places where you fail, what you actually want, what you're actually aimed at, all of that aims at one thing, and it's God's promise. And everything that I've brought up today is for one reason, is I want to see you walk into God's promises. I want to see you living a life where you feel so fulfilled because you're living out the best possible good. So right now, we're just going to give God an opportunity to speak to us. And maybe you got this down, but maybe he wants to realign you a little bit. So God, right now, I just pray that you would speak specifically to us right now. God, what should we aim at? God, what dragons are you preparing us for? God, is there something I need to let go? God, right now, I just submit to you and ask that you would speak to us right now. And God, we just submit our lives to you. And we just say, whatever you want, whatever your plan is, God, we just open our hands and say, God, whatever you want, we're available for, God. We will do, and we pray all of this in your mighty name. Amen. Amen. Okay, Nicole, would you put a little some kind of music on in the background? That'd be awesome. Okay. We're going into testimony time. Obviously, we've all done testimony time before, but I'm going to explain it super briefly. Testimony time is the time where we shove it in the devil's face that God's still moving. And the word tells us that we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, and to not live our lives so much as to shrink from death. Now, obviously, we're in testimony time, so y'all already know what part of that we're doing. So, if the Lord's been doing something in your life, we want to hear about it. So I'm going to drop down here. Kind of hurt. And if there's something that the Lord's been doing, or you just want to share something that you heard the Lord's been doing, we'd love to hear about it. So if that's you, come on up.
I got some.
Oh, there you go.
This is from my parents.
Okay.
So my parents just got back from Brazil. They went to a church conference in Brazil, and they were volunteers on the ministry team. And one of the nights, they kind of passed the mic around, and it was like, if y'all have words of knowledge about like a body part or something that needs physical healing. And so my mom got herniated disc, and like 7 or 8 Brazilians came up to the stage, and they all wanted my mom to pray for them. And so my mom was taking a long time praying for the first one in line. And like on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt? And they'd pray, you test it out. Okay, I think it's gone down a little bit. Okay, we'll keep praying, whatever. Well, there's this guy kind of near the back, and my dad was standing next to her, and wasn't praying for anybody. And he kind of was getting this disgruntled look on his face because it had been like 30 minutes that my mom was praying for this one dude. And he was kind of like, should I leave? Should I stay? I don't know. And my dad was like, hey, like, you want to, me to pray for you? And the guy was like, yeah, sure, And so he starts praying. He says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad? And this is through a translator because the guy speaks Portuguese. And so through the translator, he says, probably about a 7. I've got 2 herniated discs in my back, and I can't walk, right, and it hurts, just walking, standing, whatever. And so they started praying, and within 5 minutes, the guy, he said, his countenance changed, and he just got the biggest smile on his face, and tears started streaming down his face, and he didn't really know how to communicate directly to my dad, so he just started hugging him and started jumping up and down, and they both started praising the Lord. And so the next guy who was behind that dude came, and my dad prayed for him, and long story short, all 7 that came up all got healed. Wow. Whether my mom or dad prayed for it didn't matter. And they just saw, that was only a little bit of the miracles, but they saw countless miracles, some that they prayed for and others that the other prayer team prayed for. But the Lord's moving in Brazil, and he's moving here, but it was a really cool testimony. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
yeah. All right, anybody else? All right. Yeah, Julia.
Make a run. I'm actually in here this time. Thanks, Alan. Watching the kids. So I don't know how long ago it was, but Matthew gave an amazing message about how God doesn't give you dreams to tease you. He gives them to you because he loves you and he wants you to walk that out in your life. So I came up here and I talked about my ministry, what I wanted to do for the little girls like me. And long story short, my dad was in prison in and out my whole life. And so I just have this heart to speak to young women who have the similar experience and to give them hope and a future of your life doesn't have to look like that. So on that, I confess that I was not really being diligent in that dream, and I was just kind of letting it fall to the wayside, being a mom, 3 little kids. And so, but recently, the Lord has just like released me in it, and I just had so much inspiration and so much writing, and just I feel like I'm finally pursuing that full-fledged. And so that's just a huge testimony of a word that you gave, and I chose to just follow after it, and I'm just excited to see what's to come about it. So I wanted to give like an update. There it is.
Awesome. Yeah. Very good. All right, I'll pray us out and we'll get out of here. God, we love you. We love you so much, and we thank you that you are such a good God. More than that, God, we thank you that you are a dreaded warrior and that the enemy dreads having to confront you. And so, God, we just pray that you get all over us. God, that your favor would be evident in our lives and that the enemy would not come anywhere near because we're so close to you. God, we love you, we thank you, and we praise you. In your mighty name I pray. Amen.